The next question we want to go over is going to be this question about comparative and absolute advantage. So the question reads, when discussing comparative and absolute advantage, which best describes specialization? 1 says developing expertise in certain types of production. 2 says limiting the types of goods and services produced. 3 says targeting specific consumers and retailers. And 4 says producing certain items for specific market segments. And so the correct answer to this is going to hinge on our understanding of comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and specialization. Really quickly, as a review, what do we mean by comparative advantage? Comparative advantage is what happens when two firms who can produce the same good, same couple of goods, which firm can produce a good at a lower cost, specifically a lower opportunity cost than the other firm. The firm which can produce the goods at a lower cost has the comparative advantage. And this is contrasted with absolute advantage. Absolute advantage simply refers to if these firms put all their resources into producing a good and they have the same amount of resources, which firm can produce more? And so if you can produce more of a good, you have the absolute advantage. And so it's important to understand it's not necessarily the case that a firm with an absolute advantage also has a comparative advantage in a good, right? It's possible for it to be different. So when we come to the last thing we need to understand, which is specialization, which one do we care about, comparative or absolute advantage? And the answer is comparative advantage. We only care about which firm can produce a good at the lowest cost. And if a firm can produce one good at a lower cost than the other firm, then the firm with a comparative advantage should specialize in producing that good. All their effort, or most of their effort, should be limited towards producing that one kind of good. So now when we understand these terms, let's take a look at the answer choices to understand which one is the right answer. So the first answer choice says developing expertise in certain types of production. And so on first glance, this actually seems like a kind of an attractive answer, but if you kind of read into it, it doesn't quite hit the nail on the head. When we talk about specialization, we're not talking about developing expertise. Developing expertise implies that you're getting better, you're becoming more efficient, more proficient at producing a certain type of good. That specialization entails becoming an expert on something and lowering your costs of production even further. And so when we think about specialization in terms of comparative and absolute advantage, we don't think about that in terms of the model, at least. It might be true in the real world that if you spend all your time building one kind of good, you will get better at building that type of good. But from our understanding, specialization doesn't imply expertise. It implies focusing your efforts on specific kinds of goods and taking away effort from other types of goods. And so 1 isn't going to be the best answer here. 2 says limiting the types of goods and services produced, and this is a much better fit because when you're specializing, what you're essentially saying is you limit your production of goods you have a disadvantage in producing, and you focus your effort on goods you have an advantage in producing, specifically a comparative advantage. And so 2 is going to get that distinction really well. We can take a look at the other 2 answer choices just to make sure. The third answer choice says targeting specific consumers and retailers, and that has more to do with like marketing, less to do with like which goods are you producing or manufacturing. So it's not going to be a good answer for us here. And finally, 4 says producing certain items for specific market segments. And again, when you're specializing, you're not really adopting what you're manufacturing to what market segment you're trying to target. You're really trying to say which good can I produce at a lower cost. And so it has nothing to do with that kind of selling aspect of supply. So 2 is going to be our best answer here. We can take a look at the previous tutor's answer to make sure. And the previous tutor also said 2, and they say that as an economy realizes its comparative advantage and determines the products and services it can produce at a lower opportunity cost than its competitors, it chooses to limit its production to only those goods and services. This practice is known as specialization. Comparative advantage is the basis of all global trade as economies concentrate their scarce resources in the production of goods and services they are best at producing, such that the surplus can be traded for goods and services for which they have a comparative disadvantage in production. And so this is a really good answer, and we're going to mark that as correct.